Welcome to this week's video. It's an update on what's been going on over the last 7 months while Peter has been in Reading. We haven't been able to cruise and there have been a few engine issues, as you might be aware if you've watched some of my previous videos. Moving date is imminent, water levels allowing. That's the issue at the moment. We now have a working engine, but I wanted to keep you up to date on what's been going on over the last 7 months regarding engine problems, water level and speeds, and so on. So without further ado, let's get into the video, and I hope you enjoy it and find it interesting. There's the museum, and this is the weir, and where you see that white awning, that is part of Bell and Dragon, which is where we are going.
That's a wonderful choice.
The weather's appalling today, and we are stuck in Reading, basically. We can't move forward, but I'd like Peter to explain why we can't move forward.
Between here and Newbury, which is, I don't know how far, 20 odd miles, the River Kennet flows in and out of the canal, and at this time of year that flow can be quite fast. So there are automatic sensors set up, in fact all over the canal network, and I'm looking on the Canal and River Trust website at strong stream warnings, and for here it's talking about County Lock, which is only a few hundred metres from here. We would have to go through the town centre, through the Oracle shopping centre, and then we come to County Lock, which has a weir right next to it. And it says here from 12:36 today, and it's what, 3:45 now. Current status: caution, strong stream. We advise users of all boats, highlighted, not to navigate because the strong flows can make it difficult and dangerous. In brackets, locks may be closed. So I know it can be difficult going through the sharp bends through the middle of Reading, and if the advice says red boards don't move, then I'm inclined to follow it. Although I don't know how long this is going to go on for, because this rain is just going to make it go on even longer.
Well, the adventures of yesterday continued. We had the engineer over, and he was able to ascertain that there were not just one leak, probably not two, but a few more than that. Some of them had been going on for quite a while, and it's where connectors were loose and not held in place by Jubilee clips and were just worn, basically. The good thing is that whereas when we left things yesterday, and it was yesterday, the Eberspacher wasn't working, but it came on in the night, and Peter checked for smoke in the engine room. He checked for white smoke outside the side hatch, and all seemed to be fine. So he will get the Eberspacher serviced anyway, because it's been a long time. He's not had it serviced since he's had the boat, and that's coming up 5 years. So that is on the cards too. He may decide to do the job himself, but we will see. So we cannot run the engine. Being without hot water and electricity on the boat for a week is not the best. Some of you may already have experienced that either on a boat or in a house, and it won't be much fun.
This is an update on where we are on the boat and how it's possibly affecting plans. It's now 12 days since the engine failed, and we're still waiting for repairs to start. It's going to be early next week due to a combination of availability of engineers and spare parts. We're now into February, second week of February. Yes, Flan, thank you. Second week, you're quite right. And we are still somewhat stuck. As of about an hour ago, the nearest water lock to me, county lock here in Reading, is on caution rather than red. However, the next two measuring points at Woolhampton and Newbury are both red, and as they are upstream, I would expect that it's possible that county lock will go red at any moment, flowing down to the Thames. It is getting a bit better, but it's still a little tricky to move. It's even more tricky to move, of course, if the engine doesn't work, but that's a whole nother story. The plan to go up the Kennet and Avon Canal over to Bristol and back has sort of collided with the plan to change the stove to a diesel stove. It will be simpler and cheaper if I was closer to the dealer who will supply and fit the stove. So I'm looking at going up towards Nottingham.
And I came up today specifically because Peter had the engineer coming to see to the engine, hopefully with the right parts this time. And I expected him to be here when I arrived this morning, and there was no vehicle in sight. When I spoke to Peter, he said he came and he'd gone. So can you, first of all, say what it's been like over the last 3 weeks since the engine overheated?
Yes. Yeah, it's been increasingly difficult. The battery bank's quite large, it's 460 ampere hours. So when it went wrong, it was at the end of a period of engine running. So the batteries were pretty well charged, so it can take a few days where you're using more than you're putting back in. The solar panels were putting a little bit in, but it was cloudy and it was still getting dark pretty early. But as time went on, it got the battery state got lower and lower. An extra confusion was my battery monitor Bluetooth connection stopped working, and I couldn't quite figure that out at the time. So I gave in against my personal choices and bought an ex-demonstration little generator, and it did help. But then last Thursday, the engineer turned up. He took one look at the engine and said, "Oh, I've got the wrong parts." So off he went, and so he was back this morning with the correct size core plug. The leaking core plug was replaced, a small angled piece of rubber hose from the housing for the thermostat going into the engine was replaced, and also the filler cap, which somehow or other was bent, only very slightly, but we're trying to eliminate everything that could be a problem, and they don't cost very much. So the thermostat's only a couple of years old and that's working fine, so that's gone back in, and now I have an engine that I can use. This engineer did say they have the number of someone who I could talk to about a skin tank, and ultimately that would fix the problem, but it is a bit of a nuclear option, because it means, well, the traditional way of doing it is to take the boat out of the water, fabricate a tank, weld it to the outside of the hull, underneath where it cuts in, what they call the swim, drill through the hull and put piping in to add it to the cooling loop. The engineer today said something interesting, but again, I don't know if it's one of these legends, but he said, well, you can put the extra tank on the floor of the bilge. The flat floor where the engine mounting blocks are is the base plate of the boat. So it's the thickest part of the boat. It's 10 millimeters steel as opposed to 6 millimeters in the hull. But it might be interesting to find out if this is really a thing or just a legend. I can see that it might work because the skin tank only needs to be an inch or two thick, so it wouldn't make much difference to the floor of the bilge, and it would be able to transfer heat, perhaps not as quickly because it's thicker steel, through to the canal water. My concern is, what about the water flow? What keeps it moving? Because the normal skin tanks are vertical, so you put the water in the top, it goes down a series of little
veins.
Yeah.
Baffles.
Baffles, that's the word, thank you. Yes, yeah, flat plates. We've even had somebody come along with an infrared camera and look at I know the baffles are there, because you can't see them, of course, but you can see the hot spots running across the skin tank where the water's flowing down the baffles. So it zigzags down to the bottom and then it's scavenged back into the engine. So if I can get this number, then I will call this person and we'll have a chat.
So although the work's been done and the engine is now running, we still do not know if there is an overheating problem on the engine. And the only way to test that is to leave it running, which is how it overheated in the first place 3 weeks ago, or to do some cruising.
Yeah, it really needs to be run for an hour and a half, hour and 3/4 at 1150, 1200 RPM without stopping for locks. So what would have been a very good test would be to go out onto the Thames, and once you get through Caversham Lock, you've got quite a long cruise.
Right.
There are some long cruises there, and that will be going upstream.
So realistically speaking, based on all our future plans, it would appear that we're going to be staying here for a bit longer, I think, and then the next move that the boat does is that stretch that Peter just mentioned, going up towards Lockgate stoves.
Yeah.
So he'll be going in the right direction to get the work done on the diesel stove. We will also find out at that point whether the engine is going to overheat and take the steps necessary from there.
Right, I've run the engine for 35 minutes and we seem to have a leak down there. There's nothing gone into the bilge particularly, but that looks suspiciously like the place where the core plug was replaced. Right, the engine saga continues. So I've been doing a couple of things. I've talked to a couple of companies about getting external skin tanks fitted, and one of them made a very good point that I should think about putting an expansion header tank on the cooling system, as well as getting an external skin tank. So I've ordered a kit from the engine manufacturers, Beta Marine, and it's arrived. I had to contact them because it arrived with nothing in the box apart from the bits. But anyway, and another little job was done as well. So let's show you what I've been up to. Yeah, this is they call the heat exchanger. So this is where we put the coolant in normally, under this cap, which is just like on a car. The cap was changed because it was slightly deformed, and I don't know how that happened. Somebody at some point has trodden on that. Getting in and out of the engine bay, stepping on this casing here is quite normal, but I personally have never stepped on the cap because I'm afraid I'd fall off if my foot slipped. But Having replaced the cap, then we had some water flowing out when we had what was suspected to be an airlock somewhere in the system, and as a part of that, the engineer who came then pointed out that if I take this off, this here was deformed. In fact, that you can see is a new one which I've just fitted, and that's the old one, and you can see that it's been buckled over, and it would have been very difficult, I think, to shape that back into place, so I just put a new one in. That turned out to be quite a saga because it's held in with those two screws, which are just ordinary slot screws, and they were very, very tight. I had to go out and buy a special big screwdriver because it's a simple slot-headed screws, but with application of WD-40 I managed to get it done, and it now means I have two new caps because this came with its own cap. But now what we're going to do is add a header tank, and that's because over there is the calorifier, my hot water tank, and it's a bit high relative to the engine, and in those circumstances I now realise a header tank is recommended. So why it didn't have one in the first place, I don't know. But down here, this housing is where the thermostat is, and there's a plug there, which again was very difficult to move, but I did manage to take it out, and I've just put it back in again. It's quite a big thing. It's an 8mm Allen key. Now I'm just spinning this off now because it was sorted out before, but what I had to do the first time is to use this old windlass, put it on around the handle to give myself some extra leverage and really lean on it. I really thought I was going to break the ratchet, but we've done it, and now I can remove this and there it is. Oops, sorry, there it is with its head. So I'll just put that to one side. I don't think I'm going to need it again because I'm going to replace it with this. This is part of the kit, and this is how I connect the hose onto the header tank. So now use an old style adjustable spanner because I don't have one exactly the right size. Make it tight because there's going to be a lot of hot water in there. And now I can connect. Here's the rest of the kit. I'm going to widen the view slightly. There we go. I've got this rather curious bracket which has got to go on the wall, and that's going to hold this bottle, which is the new header tank. It's got quite an elaborate cap on it. I'm not quite sure how it works. It doesn't seem to have any vents in it, and there's this tube there, and I wasn't sure what to do with that, so I spoke to Peter Marine again, and they've sent me a diagram, and it has this little rubber cap put on it, and they've supplied a little Jubilee clip to hold it in, so that obviously stays there permanently. So the big hose connects to the bottom there, and it connects to that new housing, and I'll bring it up and put it on the wall here, so that will be above. And then when they tell me when I'm filling the system, you fill it through the normal cap first and then top it up through the header tank, and well, we'll see how that goes. And there is the header tank in situ. So I was able to use the cutout in the deck board that was made for the failed Radiator project. You can see the old Radiator lying on the floor down there because I'm trying to sell it. But yes, so the hose comes up through there and the bottle is attached to the wall, and I filled it so that the liquid is right down at the bottom, because apparently when the engine gets warm this is going to rise up. And so it's another little job done. Now I've got the Eberspacher sorted out and working. So the parts we've been waiting for finally arrived on Thursday morning, and chaps from minibus and tail lift services came out the same afternoon. So they're very familiar with diesel heaters generally, and Eberspacher in particular. So the chap who did it said he mostly does them on ambulances for some reason. Obviously a contract they have, but they're used in vans and lorries. This is the Eberspacher unit, and this is the control box. I now know that there's electronics in there, so when I switch it on it goes through a checkout system and then turns on the fuel pump. So we've got diesel coming in here, and it goes all the way around the engine bay to a tap at the back. So I was able to turn that off, and then the water hoses had to be clamped, disconnected, and then the whole unit came out. But just inside here there's a chamber where the diesel is pumped in, and there's a glow plug which ignites it, and that's the burn chamber, and that produces all the heat. And this is called hydronic because it heats the water, which then flows into the calorifier to heat up the domestic hot water and through the radiators. Well, okay. There's two versions of these things. One of them does air. But the ones on boats I think all do water, because that's what we need them for. So it took a while to sort it out, but it's now running smoothly, and we've got another source of hot water, and also I've got radiators, so now I can go ahead and disconnect the stove ready for the diesel stove to come in, because if we do get a cold spell I've got radiators to keep me warm.
I hope you've enjoyed this week's video. It's been 7 months of non-cruising for Peter, which he's getting itchy feet now. He wants to be on the move. But it looks like everything has fallen into place. As you saw, the Eberspacher was the last thing that needed doing, and it is now serviced. The engine is running, though whether it overheats or not on long stretches, we won't know until we start moving. And he's now got a header tank. That might go some way towards reducing the overheating problem. We'll wait and see. So I hope you've enjoyed the video that I've put together this week. It's a compilation of what's been going on over the last 7 months. And I'm hoping that when we do set off, which will be on Saturday, it's imminent, that it will not overheat, and we'll have some really lovely cruising at speed, 1200 RPM. That would be brilliant. Peter usually has to keep the revs down because of the overheating. I think I'm waffling now, so I think I'd better say bye-bye. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing to my channel if you have already done so. Please consider it if you haven't. And until next week and next week's video, which will be our first cruising in 7 months. Bye.